これからのセッションは、世良さんによるScala OSS プロジェクトを6年以上続けるために必要なことということで、英語のセッションになっております。では、よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。Okay, so thank you for attending my talk today. I'm going to talk about how to continuously maintain Scala open source project for several years. And in practice, all the tips I will explain in this talk is very basic for Scala experts here. But I believe that sharing this kind of information to the people who are recently interested in contributing to open source softwares and starting new software projects. So what am I talking about today? The information here in this slide comes from the ScalaMatsuri's official website. Especially the part, there are not so many developers who have been working on a single Scala project for several years. I believe that it's pretty important for the community to increase the long-lived contributors to the community. And so I'd like to share my pieces of knowledge that I acquired through my several year experiences. So here is the agenda. I will start with my self-introduction, and then my first encounter with Scala, and then the concept and the philosophy of my Scala open source project. And finally, I will share how to build and maintain long-lived open source projects. So, first of all, let me introduce myself briefly. And my name is Kazuhiro Sera. And I'm working at the Smart News, which is a startup based in Tokyo. Smart News builds and operates news aggregator service in Japan and the US, all over the world. Recently, the app started providing coupons in Japan. Please install the app and use the coupon at McDonald's and Yoshinoya and many restaurants. I believe that in Odaiba area, there are Yoshinoya and McDonald's and Jonathan other restaurants. So please install the app. And as an individual developer, I specialize in server-side development, in especially Java, Ruby, and Scala. And I have been a Scala enthusiast for several years. I started several Scala open source projects, such as ScalaikeJDBC, which is a database library, and also Skinny Framework, which is a full-stack web application framework. That is a servlet-based one. And Skinny is highly inspired by Ruby on Rails. And then, one moment. And also, I'm one of the maintainers of Scala, Scala8, the JSON4S. They are very long-lived project. In this talk, I will mainly talk about the ScalaikeJDBC's issue, philosophy and the concepts. So I have now I have one request to all of you here. If you're a user of whatever I maintain or any other Scala open source project, then please click the start button on the GitHub. Just doing that is also a very good contribution to the community. Actually, the number of the stars is very encouraging for the open source project maintenance. And so if you like some work by someone on the GitHub, that you should not hesitate to express your gratitude or your endorsement to them. And so before starting talking about open source, I'd like to look back my first encounter with Scala. The version of Scala that I used at the beginning was 2.7.3. When was the 2.7.3 released? Actually, as you can see, it's on January 14, 2009. It's more than 9 years ago. I can't believe that. So actually, I remember the first time I used Scala. I can't believe that it's 9 years ago. And 9 years ago, I was a Java developer. Then I'm looking for a new programming language that makes me so excited. but I was not satisfied with Groovy. Then I met Scala. My first impression of the language is that actually the ID integration is still a little bit poor. So for me, it's a little bit early to start using it at a serious project. But on the other hand, I was very curious about the language's concept, which makes it both the object-oriented and also functional programming. And also, I was very interested in the actor model. At the time, Scala had the actors module, the actors package, and as a part of the standard library. So that's the second point I was very interested in. Lastly, I had an affection for its concise syntax. It's very cool it was very cool for me. So accordingly, I started learning it seriously in the following year, in 2010. Sorry, I'm suffering the hay fever. So can we try the very, very old Scala version that I tried 9 years ago? It's a 273. Is it possible? Try it at this moment. I think it should be possible. So I tried it on SBT, but actually, unfortunately, it doesn't work on the Java 8, JDK 8. So it failed to boot the repo. So how about 2.8? Actually, the error message is a little bit different, but the 2.8 also doesn't work on the JDK 8. So 2.9, actually it's the same as 2.8. So as you may know, to tell you the truth, the Scala 2.10.1 and the older versions don't work on JDK 8. And the Scala 2.10.2 has fixed the issues which prevents compatibility with JDK 8. So in the future, the similar situation can happen because recently the release cycle of JDK has been changed. So the JDK 9 is already released, and the JDK will be released within several days, within maybe 3 days or a few days. So sometimes we need to be aware of the combination of JDK and also the Scala language version more than ever. Okay, so we understood that we have to use Java 7 or JDK 7 to run the Scala 2.7.3, right? So I did it, but somehow it still shows some error messages. The answer for that is that we cannot run very old Scala versions with current SBT. At the time the Scala 2.7 was released, the version of SBT was still 0.7. So, and actually, SBT 0.7 is completely different from current SBT. And so you should avoid using current SBT for this kind of experiment and have to use the Scala script to boot very old Scala language without any problems. Okay, so that was a very minor topic. So let's go through the major changes after 2.7. Here is the chronology of Scala major version releases after 2.7. And after a lapse of 9 years, the Scala team had 5 major version releases. And so, okay, I'd like to go through all the major versions. And in Scala 2.8, the 2 major features have been introduced, named and the default argument of the method and the package object. Then nowadays, these features are very common for us, so we cannot imagine coding without them. And then 2.9, there's not so many changes. The major ones are only the update, which is formerly known as application trait, and also Java interoperability modules like Java converters and Java conversions. So it's not minor, but it's not so huge changes. And one thing at the time, every patch version is not binary compatible with with its previous patch version, like 2.90 and 2.91 are not binary compatible. So if you are new to Scala, it may be very difficult to understand. But actually, at the time, it's a very tough limitation for the community and also developers. And for something completely different, 2.10 was a turning point. A lot of improvements and enhancements were introduced in the version. The biggest thing is the improvement on the binary compatibility between patch versions. So since 2.10, 2.10.0 and 2.10.1 are binary compatible, and 2.10.0, 2.10.1, 2.10.3, 2.10.2, and 2.10.3, all the patch versions are compatible. So that was a huge progress in the terms of the open source project growth, community growth. And yeah, so in the release, not only the binary compatibility improvement, but also so many language features are introduced. For example, value classes and implicit classes, string interpolation, and the future APIs and the dynamic and macros. After 2.10, 2.11 and 2.12 were actually the most changes were improvements regarding the macro implementation and also the internal Java 8 compatibility support or related optimization. So as a standpoint of language user, there were no significant changes in its features. So that's all the updates since I started using Scala 9 years ago. And as you can see, in fact, there are not so many changes recently, especially within 2 or 3 years. So the language is recently very stable, and also the changes are very moderate. So until Scala 3 with Dirty Compiler will be released, the language change, there won't be so many language changes. So I think actually it's a little bit unfortunate for so many people in the community, but on the other hand, it's good timing to start your own project. It's because the situation is very stable. All right then, so let's move on to the main subject of the presentation. In this part, I will explain the philosophy and background of my open source project. The project is ScalikeJDBC. In 2011, I was looking for a practical database library in Scala because I was going to use Scala for a real project at work. And one of the most important requirements was accessing the relational database efficiently. So I was looking into the existing open source project library, open source libraries, but I was not able to find any ideal ones for me. I liked Twitter's Quillas. It's very simple, and also it looked very reasonable for me. But unfortunately, the library supports only MySQL, so I was not able to use the library for my project because in my project, I needed to access not only the other RVMS, such as Postgres and also Oracle. So I gave up using it. And also, I looked into the Scala query, which is currently it's a Sleek, but yeah, at that time it's a Scala query. But the library looked a bit hard to master for me, so therefore I gave up using it too. As it turned out, I decided to create my own library which is the most suitable for my purpose. I started very small pieces of code and well-tested one. I did so many tests on it for my use cases. And that's why the ScalikeJDBC was born. And so I made it because I just needed it. And also, I wanted to start something new. So at that time, both Scala and also working on the open source project were new challenges for me. So I was so excited with it. And here is the chronology of Scala database libraries. In 2010, LiftMapper, which is part of the LiftWeb framework, and the Scala Query, the Querylas, the Circumflex ORM, which is also part of the web framework, and the norm of the Play, whatever, the Square, and the OR broker. They are major ones. Then I started ScalikeJDBC in 2011, and also in 2014, I started Skinny ORM, which is truly an ORM which is based upon the ScalikeJDBC. And also the Skinny ORM is highly inspired by Ruby on Rails, Rails active record. Then time passed. Currently, I understand that Sleek, which is the successor of Scala Query, and the Doobie, and the Quill are very popular. But I would like to, I'm very glad if you prefer my works than others. But anyway. So next topic is what is a practical? So I'd like to think about what a practical library is. I have opinions about what a practical library must be. And let's say if a library has a very fancy APIs, but it is not designed to resolve real-world business situation, real-world business problems, or new team members need very long time to catch up. Such one is surely non-practical. We should avoid such situations. And in other cases, you may have felt some difficulties with the library, which doesn't provide sufficient information for debugging or investigation in production system. Yeah, so such kind of library badly affect your productivity and also stability of the production systems. So in addition to that, we should choose library which don't frequently break API compatibility. In some cases, and also in some cases, also the author of a library may suddenly stop maintaining the library due to some issues. So actually these are very bad examples, but we should avoid this situation as possible we can. So I think not doing that is practical for me. So please see the slide. To make ScalikeJDBC practical, I really value these things. The catchphrase is just write SQL and get things done. Yeah, it's very simple, and I believe that it's obviously practical. The library is easy to understand, and it doesn't require specific knowledge except for Scala basics and JDBC or RDBMS basics. So you don't see any steep learning curve with it. And then not only the easiness, but the well-considered flexibility to deal with edge cases. It's also a very major factor to be practical. And no breaking API changes as much as possible is also a nice attitude to reduce the effort of library users. Okay, so tips for continuation. So let's think about the necessary techniques for maintaining the library for a certain amount of time. I have working on the library for more than 6 years. As we already saw, during the time period, several major Scala major versions have been released: 2.9, 2.10, 2.11, and 2.12, and the 2.13 will be released soon. I don't know, actually maybe this year or next year. So more than 6 years is actually very long. And so I believe that the ScalikeJDBC is one of the most long-lived projects in the Scala community. So what is the tips for continuation? So there's three things. The first one is keeping the library simple is very important to effortlessly continue the project. To keep it contributors friendly, and actually the contributors must include yourself. So yeah, actually we sometimes forgot our past work. So the project should be very simple and should be contributors friendly, including ourselves. And also, to keep the project simple, you may need to decide avoiding to depend on other Scala libraries. I will explain the reason in the next slide. And aside from that, having appropriate knowledge on the important factors like cross-buildings or binary compatibilities is very important. And lastly, you are not alone, so you can build your own community. Okay, so the first one is avoiding depending on the Scala libraries. So let's avoid depending on Scala libraries. Really? Why should we do that? So it's unfortunate, but in fact, it's an effective practice in terms of maintainability of your libraries, not project. It's your open source libraries. So there are several reasons to avoid the library dependencies, which depend on the specific Scala runtime or other Scala libraries. The most painful one is that we may need to wait for other libraries' releases every time the Scala major version has been released. And some of them may become unmaintained. If it happens, you need to maintain then the other libraries as well, or need to switch to others. So in general, depending on the many Scala libraries increases the risks of binary compatibilities as well. By the way, just in case, I should explain the difference between the source code compatibility and the binary compatibility. So, okay, so as for the source code compatibility, if a dependent library is not source compatible, the compilation just fails. So it's obvious, and also it's it's safe. But if a dependent library is not binary compatibility, it can cause runtime exception, like the no such method found or no such classes found. So the binary compatibility may cause more serious problems in production systems. And also, depending on the Scala libraries, can be a fetter for cross-building. So the cross-building means providing libraries towards several Scala major versions. And if you would like to do cross-building, depending on other Scala libraries can be a fetter to achieve that. For example, if even one of the depending libraries doesn't do exactly same cross-building, your cross-building fails. So you cannot support all binary versions due to that. So it's very tough limitation. And I have to say that it's unrealistic to avoid the situation if you depend on the many Scala libraries. So therefore, if you really need to do cross-building, you should consider to depend on the Java libraries as much as possible, or not to depend on truly truly unnecessary libraries, also as much as possible. So if you choose, depending on Java libraries, there are several benefits. Generally speaking, the famous Java libraries have much more users than Scala libraries. Actually, it depends on situations, but it's generally speaking. So you can expect they are well-maintained and also well-tested by many developers. So, of course, with Java libraries, you don't have any extra efforts when upgrading the Scala major versions. That's also a good point. But on the other hand, you will see some downside of using Java in Scala. You have to understand how Java interoperability modules work. Also, you need to understand related to tips for it. Also, one moment. Also, you have to completely encapsulate the Java world, which sometimes bring you a lot of inconvenient null values. But I think they are inside the permissible range. So next is tips about cross-building. If you're not a library maintainer yet, you may not be familiar with cross-building. So I will tell you the ScalikeJDBC maintainers do in its development in regard to cross-building efforts. Thanks to Kenji Yoshida's efforts, the ScalikeJDBC has been supporting as many Scala binary versions as possible throughout its whole history. The ScalaikeJDBC version 1 supports 2.90, 2.91, and 2.92. And the ScalaikeJDBC 2 supports both 2.10 and 2.11. Since version 3, we support 2.10, 2.11, and 2.12. And we will be able to support 2.13 as well if it will be released. But there is no strong reason to continue supporting so many, let's say, the major versions. So there is a vague possibility to drop 2.10 when we start supporting 2.13. But anyway, I believe that you should understand we eagerly do cross-building for our users in different situations. To do that, CI or continuous integration is key to success. Properly configuring the CI builds is the most important practice for cross-building. If you don't configure CI to check cross-building automatically, it will be very annoying to manually check the validity of every pull request. So I think this is not a nice to have, but it's must have for Scala open source project maintainers. And also, one other practice is having multiple source directories corresponding to Scala binary versions. That's very useful for, that's very useful when dealing with the duplicated APIs between Scala major versions or third-party libraries major upgrades. You can place a bit different source code in a special source directories like source main Scala dash 2.10, 2.11 to 2.12. And then you can have a different implementation for specific class or trait in several Scala versions, respectively. Okay, so next topic is about binary compatibility. So let's go on to the next. How to ensure the binary compatibility. I'd like to introduce MiMa for the people who are not familiar with it. With MiMa, we can easily detect the binary compatibility issues on our code base while developing it. So by the way, You may think that Scala libraries can often become fragile in terms of binary compatibility, while Java is always safe. But it's not true. If you don't have any bad experience with Java libraries in terms of binary compatibility, you should have been a very lucky guy for a long time. Of course, Java language runtime itself is very stable, and also it's surely binary compatible between major versions so far. But it is not same as to any third-party libraries. So even famous Java libraries sometimes break their binary compatibilities between their releases. For example, it's not accidentally, but Jackson 2.x are intentionally binary incompatible. In other words, the binary compatibility between Jackson 2.7 and 2.8 is not guaranteed at all. Okay, so how to ensure the binary compatibility? The using MiMa is very easy and it's very simple, but we need to understand the tips to use it. So the MiMa stands for Migration Manager for Scala. And the tool is created and has been maintained by the Lightbend team, which is formerly known as TypeSafe. And using the MiMa's SBT plugin is the smoothest way to use the tool in your project. Then should we always be very strict about binary compatibility? So of course not. It's up to the type of your project, the type of library. If you provide a very low-level library which can be used by other libraries, you should be very careful about the compatibility. So both of the source code compatibility and the binary compatibility. But as for directly used library, like web application framework or whatever, actually, sometimes the web framework brings some problems about, but anyway. So directly used source code, directly used library or in-house libraries, which you can restrict the possible usage of the library. In that case, you don't need to be very strict about the binary compatibility. So what the ScalaikeJDBC's policy, thanks to Kenji Yoshida, again, we already defined clear rules for that. You can find it in contributing.md in a project. So as you may know, the contributing.md is the guide for contributors on GitHub. The ScalaikeJDBC project bump major or minor versions when introducing some binary incompatible changes to the latest code. Conversely, so the old patch versions in the same minor version must be binary compatible. Also, the team must manage Git branches to correspond to each binary compatible version, like 2.5.x or 3.0.x, 3.1.x. The other thing you should know about MiMa is the appropriate configuration. So this is an actual MiMa build setting of the ScalaikeJDBC. The most important part are skipping the unstable major versions, such as 2.13.0/3, and also checking all previous versions, all previous patch versions. The reason why we need to skip unstable major is obvious. Actually, ScalaikeJDBC doesn't provide the binary for all milestone or RC versions, so we cannot check the difference with it. And as for checking all the existing patch versions, the reason for that is that a little bit complicated. So let's think about a real situation. Let's say a team is, let's say team configured MiMa to check the compatibility with only version 1.0, and the team added a new method in 1.1, and then they are going to delete the method introduced in 2.1 in 2.2. In that case, the 2.1 and the 2.2 must be binary incompatible, but the configuration of the MiMa cannot detect the situation because the 2.2 is compatible with 2.1. A little bit confused. So 1.2 is compatible with 1.0. So we should check all the existing versions. So, okay, lastly, I'd like to mention the importance of building your own community and helping each other. Okay, as you may know, the Kenji Yoshida is literally Scala Ninja, and he working on a lot of projects. He has been helping a lot of Scala developers and a lot of Scala projects throughout the year. That's definitely awesome. But regarding my open source project, of course, Kenji contributed a lot. I'd like to express my deep gratitude about it. But not only Kenji, but also others also contributed. There are 65 contributors in total. So I'd like to express my gratitude for all the people who contributed, all the people who used the library in production, all the people who gave us feedback on GitHub or anywhere in the social media. So anyway, so thanks to so many people, I could continue working on a single open source project for more than 6 years. So to actualize such situation in your project must be open for contribution. So you should know the famous open-closed principle, that is open for extension but closed for modification. Then I'd like to advocate OSS open-closed principle. So the open for contribution but closed for confusion. I believe that it is very effective to make the project long-lived. To be open for contribution, your project must be friendly for new contributors and easy to set up, easy to understand, and easy to edit. So the well-designed module structure, which enables developers to edit only minimum parts of the project for a single purpose. And then to be closed for confusion, you should have well-maintained test suites, which automatically detects common mistakes by new developers. Also, defining stipulated project rules will be necessary if so many people are interested in the project. So lastly, library maintainers must overcome upgrades such as Scala major versions, the SBT upgrades, or any other external changes. To be honest, I'm still taking time to adapt SBT version 1 to all my projects. But I think it's a kind of a battle of patience. So keep it simple and keep working on it at our own pace. Okay, so thank you for listening. I'd like to express my gratitude to all attendees and also the conference organizers and all Scala enthusiasts. Let's bring our own long-lived Scala community together. Thank you so much.